Okay, so as I said earlier, my name's Andy Waite. This activity is being videoed on YouTube, so hopefully if some people came and then left before we let a few more in, they're watching it on YouTube. So thank you for your attendance, everybody. It's lovely to see the public gallery so full. I'd like to make a couple of observations about that. Essentially, if you think about the House of Commons, people go into the public gallery in the House of Commons, but they do not interfere with the activities that are going on there. So think of it that as you are observers, you're not an audience. You know, you're just observing what's going on. You'll have no more effect than somebody watching it on YouTube. As long as you can stick to that, that will be fine. This is my third call-in, and emotions run quite high. But I think it is my job as chair to ensure that everybody has the right to speak and everybody is listened to respectfully. So when we come to the public speakers, I will not be asking questions from them, and nobody else will be asking questions of the public speakers or the councillors. They will just speak, make their statements, and then we'll move on to the next one. It's very important that the people who are most affected by this change in the road system in Bath are the ones that we listen to the most carefully. So that's why we are listening to the 13 speakers from the general public and the 3 out of the 4 ward councillors to speak. So, can I just say one more thing before we move on to the meeting proper? This call-in is about the process of how the decision was made. It is not necessarily about the decision itself. Obviously, there is a blurring there, but if you make a speech about how much you hate the decision, that's not the most effective way of using your time. You'd be better off talking about the circumstances which led up to that decision being made. Okay? Right, so without more ado, we can move on to the formal items. So item 1 is for me to explain the process. So I haven't quite done that yet. I've just talked about the public. So essentially, after the public speakers, there will be a 10-minute speech from Colin Blackburn, gentleman over there, who will be speaking for the call-in, and he will represent the 9 councillors who have decided that the call-in is a good idea. And after that 10-minute speech, then there will be questions to Colin from the panel members, and that can go on for as long as it needs to go on for. So when that naturally comes to a conclusion, we move on to the statements from the cabinet member, who also gets 10 minutes, but because of the nature of the work of the cabinet, in fact we have 2 cabinet members with us today. They don't get 10 minutes each, they get 10 minutes between them, because it wouldn't be fair otherwise. So they get 5 minutes each, and they will run one after the other. There won't be the opportunity to question the first speaker and then go on to the second one. We will run that 10 minutes straight through, and then once they've both spoken for 5 minutes each, they will then have the opportunity for the panel to ask questions of them. After that, the closing statement is made by the cabinet member, which I assume will be you, Amanda. You're not dividing that as well? You are dividing it as well? What, the closing speech? Okay, so you heard that. So there will be a sort of 2 Ronnies effect for the last 5 minutes of the speech. And then once all that information has been gathered by the panel from the speakers and from the public speakers and from the councillors that have spoken earlier, there will be a debate which will be open, and you can all listen to the debate as it goes on. And then at some point in that debate, one councillor will propose a solution. Now, there are 3 potential solutions that can be taken. The first one is to dismiss the call-in and say that there is nothing wrong with the process or the decision, it's all good. That's the first one. The The second one is to refer the decision back to the persons who have made that decision, for them to reconsider the extra information that they hadn't considered sufficiently before, if that's the view of the panel. And the third solution, which is very rarely used, is for there to be a full council meeting of all the councillors across Bath and North East Somerset to discuss this particular call-in. So there are three alternatives, and at the end of the meeting, one of those alternatives will be agreed by the panel by a show of hands, and a majority view will be carried, and that will be the end of the meeting. I hope that's clear. Right, so we now move on to the emergency evacuation procedure.
When the continuous alarm bell sounds, you must evacuate the building by one of the designated exits and proceed to the named assembly point. The designated exits are signposted. Arrangements are in place for the safe evacuation of disabled people.
Okay, now we're quite busy here. There is no fire drill, so if there is an alarm, it's genuine. But obviously, take your time, because this Guildhall is not designed really for such large numbers, and there's lots of steps, so just take your time. And then item 3, apologies for absence.
Apologies from Councillor John Leach, who's been substituted by Councillor Malcolm Treby. Apologies from Councillor Alex Beaumont, who's been substituted by Councillor Tim Ball. Apologies from Councillor Anna Box, who's been substituted by Councillor Toby Simon. Apologies from Councillor Saskia Hedges, who's been substituted by Councillor Joanna Wright, and we have Councillor Eleanor Jackson in for the Labour vacancy.
Okay, thank you, Michaela. So we move on to item 4, declarations of interest. They've changed the system. I think you're all... And your son lives in Canada? Okay, fine. I think I can accept that declaration of interest. Okay, are there any other declarations of interest anyone wishes to make? So we move on to the public and council speakers. They will each get 3 minutes, and I think the councillors are speaking from where they are. The public members will come down, and Michaela will help them and sit in that chair. And that's where they will speak. And you may have noticed 1 or 2 discreetly placed screens around the place, and you'll also notice at the moment it says 0.00. When the speakers start, it will start at 3 and it will go down to 0, and if you're still speaking at 0, I will ask you to bring your statement to a close. Okay, so is it Councillor Elliott first? Yeah. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. I'll mainly be addressing the Winifred's Lane part of the intervention, as that's the part in my ward. But just to begin, I'll note that I'm supportive of the other interventions and supportive of the linking of the 3 interventions, as they're likely to have knock-on effects on each other. To bring things back to basics, the purpose of the livable neighbourhood interventions is to discourage through traffic from using unsuitable residential roads and to encourage drivers to stay on the more major roads. Specifically in this case, the Winifred's Lane intervention was designed to discourage northbound through traffic from coming up Cavendish Road as a route up to Lansdowne Road via Winifred's Lane and Zion Road. The intervention was not designed to have any impact on southbound traffic. I'm pointing that out because the narrative part of the report tends to present figures for total traffic flow numbers in both directions combined. So I want to highlight some numbers showing the significant reduction in northbound traffic that can be seen in Annex D on pages 266 to 270 of the report. The baseline monitoring for northbound traffic on Cavendish Road showed 1,880 cars per day, with over 1,300 of those cars, 1,300 of those cars, continuing up into Winifred's Lane, an entirely unsuitable, narrow, single-track road. By March last year, the last term time monitoring given in the report, the northbound figure for Cavendish Road was down to 1,163 cars per day, a reduction of over 700 cars per day. In the Easter school holiday, that came down to 905 cars per day, nearly 1,000 below the baseline measure. That is a lot fewer cars travelling north through the area, nearly 40% down on baseline in term time, nearly 50% if you compare the baseline to holidays. If the scheme is removed, those cars will simply come back, most likely more if the interventions further down the hill are left in place, which is why these are linked interventions. It is obviously true that the drivers still choosing to use this route as a shortcut are now going around the western part of Zion Hill and Zion Road. Would I like to see that northbound traffic reduced still further? Absolutely. I know we can do more to reduce it, including working with the schools further up the hill to reduce the school run traffic. But we cannot let the perfect be the enemy of the good. There seems to be an assertion from those opposing the scheme that there was nothing wrong before. That is simply not true. Winifred's Lane itself was, I would assert, potentially lethal for pedestrians, with 1,300 cars a day hurtling up a lane barely the width of a car, no pavements for most of its length, high walls or thick hedges on either side. There's much more I'd like to say, but I'm up against my 3 minutes, so I'll finish by saying that I acknowledge there is more we can do, that this scheme has reduced northbound traffic by 40% and turned a lane that was a potential pedestrian death trap into a space where you can happily let your kids walk unaccompanied. And I believe that is worth keeping, so I'd like the panel to reject the call-in, please.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott. 7 seconds you didn't use, so I think you got your 3 minutes worth, especially as the time was slightly late kicking off anyway. So we move on to Councillor Lucy Hodge. When you're ready, Lucy.
I've been asked by residents to ensure their views are heard, which is my focus this morning. While the entirety of the scheme is important, I'll be reflecting on Winifred's Lane. For 10 years, from 2008, I walked 3 young children along Zion Road to school. Since then, I've used this route on foot most weekdays and also by car. I know the area well and paid close attention to the impacts. Before the ETRO, during peak hours, a stream of traffic accelerated up Winifred's Lane, the sound of engines revving at the bottom, then the sight of vehicles emerging fast from the top, in conflict with traffic on Zion Road, then joining a queue of backed-up idling vehicles. There was, of course, no pavement for most of the lane, an unsafe environment for both adults and children. It's changed now. Rather than revving engines, it's increased numbers of walkers, schoolchildren and cyclists. I recognise the differences in opinion amongst the residents I represent. I've taken on board all the comments I've received by email, in person from the chair of Zion Hill Residents Association, at a community meeting and on the doorstep, and present both views. Concerns of those opposed include potential increases in traffic along Julian Road, impacts on journeys to St Andrew's School, and concerns about displaced traffic along Zion Road past the Kingswood School exit. For short periods in the morning and evening, some mostly school-run traffic is still choosing the winding route along Zion Road, impatient at the need to give way. Mitigations will deter pavement driving, work with the school and increase visibility around the vehicle exit. Changes in traffic on Julian Road are within normal variances. Increases in journey times are measured in seconds. To illustrate views of supporters, I quote from 4 residents actually living on Zion Road. I've walked regularly on Winifred's Lane for over 30 years. In recent years, it became too hazardous. It's now a delight to walk peacefully on a quiet little lane with cyclists and walkers. Cycling in the area is more relaxed than it used to be, and riding up Winifred's Lane is now a practical proposition. I drive a car as well as cycle. I've not noticed any inconvenience. Final quote. We moved here after the consultation and expressed our strong support. We walk to and from town daily along this route, encountering many of our neighbours, including cyclists heading up the lane. The council is to be commended for the bravery to pursue changes in the face of a small, unrepresentative group of extremely vocal opponents. A determined negative campaign on social media has had a disproportionate impact, but what is more important is what I hear from regularly speaking to Lansdowne residents on the doorstep, and that's over 400 residents in the past year. What this tells me is that many residents quietly and consistently support this change. Politicians should have the courage to deliver on the changes they have promised. Please reject this call-in and uphold the decision.
Thank you, Lucy. we now move on to Paul Roper. Councillor Paul Roper, when you're ready, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Paul Roper. I'm Ward Councillor for Kingsmead Ward that contains 2 of the 3 interventions, and my fellow councillor George Tomlin is unable to be here today, but he's fully supportive of this statement. We recognise that this topic is highly divisive for some and positions are entrenched at this time, and as always there's a silent majority. But we ask the panel to dismiss the calling. We'd like to point out to the panel that this council has committed to Vision Zero, which is aimed at eliminating all road fatalities and serious injuries in Bath and North East Somerset, and is very aware of its responsibilities in that regard. This administration was elected in 2019 and again in 2023 with a significant majority and a strong mandate to deliver its progressive manifesto commitments, including interventions such as the ones being considered today. We're the first council outside of London to introduce a clean air zone, which has significantly reduced commercial traffic and pollution in the city centre. We're encouraging active travel by creating infrastructures that are fit for purpose with safer routes for pedestrians and cyclists. This administration is not anti-car, but we're simply not putting the car first. We're not banning cars, but your journey may take a little longer and not be quite so direct as it used to be. We are creating livable neighbourhoods that prioritise residents and communities with a focus on placemaking. In short, making places better to live in. In reaching its decision, we asked the panel to consider the following. The 3 interventions associated with the scheme were designed as a single package of measures and are not to be cherry-picked. The scheme is not perfect, but the statistics are showing that they're generating favourable results. We asked the panel to encourage officers to promote the fact that journey times along Julian Road are only a matter of a minute or 2 longer at peak times, and to make further interventions to further reduce rat running in Marlborough Lane and Sion Hill. Interventions such as speed bumps, signage and the possible use of APL technology. We asked the panel to recognise that a significant proportion of objectors to the scheme do not live in the area and are the very commuters who we are trying to encourage to use alternative main roads that are only slightly slower. I'd like the panel to recognise that residents in the Circus and Gay Street area have shown very significant and consistent support for the interventions, and car journeys on Bennett Street alone are 500 vehicles per day lower than before the trial. And finally, I'd also like to make the panel aware that the western end of the Royal Crescent has been closed to traffic for decades, preventing through commuting completely, and no one ever really notices. And my point of that is that you get used to change and you adapt. I repeat our request that the panel dismiss the calling. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, 3 councillors, all very good with your timing, so well done. We now move on to members of the public. I'm going through the order in front of me, so there's no priorities as far as I'm concerned. The first person is Ian Wilson. Perhaps it might be helpful if I read out the list so you know where you are, just in case you don't. So Ian's first, and then Rachel Hushen, Teresa Franklin, Bethany Klaus-Widdock, who's speaking on behalf, oh no, she's speaking for herself, and William O'Connell is speaking on behalf of Olivia Webb, Robert Parker, Tim Spratt, Neil Billett, Neil Dickinson, Malcolm Baldwin, Will Honey, Anne Pearson and Richard Brown. So they are the speakers. So Ian, I think you've probably worked out what's going on, so in your own time.
I'm speaking as a representative of the Heart of Lansdowne Conservation Group. We do not debate the Gay Street and Catherine Place EHRI decisions, but the Winfrids Lane EHRI decision is rational, using flawed interpretations of data from the reports, data which is at odds with the statement of reasons for the trial. Let me cover a number of important points. The views and concerns of local residents have been ignored. The Council's own report shows 72% opposition from respondents within the trial area. In the case of the Sydney Road, Sydney Place EHRI decision, Councillor Edit stated that, crucially, the panel heard that 72% of those living inside the livable neighbourhood support it. Why is the same logic not being applied in this case, where 72% are in opposition? The decision document states an objective is to disperse traffic over a wider area. Traffic has not been dispersed. It has simply been displaced within the trial area, past more houses, and has put more than 500,000 extra vehicles past schools. On Sign Road past the gardens, significantly more traffic is going past extremely dangerous blind bends past Sign Hill Place. The decision document blames this increased traffic on Sign Road on school traffic. This is blatantly false. The baseline data was taken during term time, whilst trial data was taken both during term time and out of term time. All the measurements showed a substantial increase in traffic. The increase of up to 880% northbound on Sign Road past the gardens can only be blamed on the closure of Winfrids Lane. The proposed mitigations will not reduce the dangers created on Sign Road, as the topography cannot be changed. We note the second sentence in the decision document stating the trial will be permanent, irrespective of mitigations. Predetermination? Data on the net change in CO2 emissions in the reports is lacking. Given the Council's commitment, quite rightly, to address the climate emergency, this is astonishing. The Council's own numbers show an additional 1,649 kilometres per day being driven around the Winfrids Lane area due to displaced traffic. This equates to 30 additional tonnes of carbon emitted per year. So money intended to address the climate emergency has funded a trial that increased CO2 emissions rather than reducing them. This alone is a reason for the scheme to fail. The claim that active travel in the Winfrids Lane area has increased has no supporting data. Only a narrow set of roads were considered. A net change in active travel across the whole trial area was not evaluated. You are a scrutiny panel. Please scrutinise the data that has been misused in making this irrational decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we move on to Rachel Hushen. You didn't listen to my comments earlier on. You're not allowed to clap in the House of Commons. You're not allowed to clap here because you are interfering, you're intimidating those who don't get a clap, so it's just not right. So please refrain from doing that.
Good morning, panel. I'm here in a personal capacity as a respondent and resident of Lansdowne, living within the trial area, and a participant in community speed watch sessions on Cavendish Road and Winifred's Lane. I request that you decline the call-in. The Council have run a rigorous, fair and extensive consultation process, which has made huge efforts to engage with a very wide group of individuals far beyond organised community groups. The linked experimental scheme was informed by this and designed by officers to improve walking and cycling routes and to reduce through traffic using Cavendish Road northbound. The trial has achieved this objective by cutting northbound through traffic on Cavendish Road by up to and around 800 cars per day. There is a slight inconvenience to drivers of under a minute. The disinformation propagated relating to impacts on Julian Road has largely been proven wrong by the data. I've witnessed a lot more walkers and cyclists in the area using and cargo bikes, especially parents cycling to St Stephen's School. There is a key difference in attitudes to the trial within the trial area. Those who walk or cycle or use public transport predominantly tend to support the scheme. Those who don't support the scheme predominantly drive private vehicles for their principal mode of travel. This must inform any decision-making. The report details that the linked scheme is a good scheme, but one which could be improved, and I agree with the recommendations. I would like to address the school-run traffic for Kingswood Independent Prep School. The data suggests that school-related vehicles are still using the route northbound past the prep school exit gate. This gate is a significant distance, by the way, from the actual school. And by about 9:10 in the morning and after school pickup, this traffic has largely gone. Yet I would still urge the school and parents who are driving this route to develop and implement a better traffic management plan, such as a school park and stride scheme, or even a term-time school street, to address an issue which concerns some residents, quite rightly, from Sion Hill. Finally, the trial is actually supported by a significant group of locals living in the area. These locals want positive change, in line with council policy. They agree with the recommendations that the scheme is a good scheme and believe it should not be removed. Improvements can be made to it, and it should be made permanent. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. I'm very impressed with all the timings, all very good, so well done. Teresa Franklin, please. When you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. I'm a Bath resident and I've lived in the trial area for well over 20 years. I fully support the Lower Lansdowne and Circus Etro. I have spent many hours on Cavendish Road and Winifred's Lane with the Speed Watch team and have first-hand experience of counting traffic, measuring car speed and sadly of bad, threatening behaviour by motorists, one of whom is in this room. I walk a lot and in my opinion, our brave councillors have made the livable neighbourhood much safer and more conducive to active travel. Livable neighbourhoods are there to solve big problems, like reducing air pollution and reducing traffic on residential roads that were never designed to be used as cut-through. In the many consultations conducted over an extended period, Cavendish Road has always been identified as the problem road, the rat run. The rat run which fed into Winifred's Lane and the M4 and the A46. So the big question is, has the trial succeeded in reducing traffic caused by rat running on Cavendish Road? Yes, it has. Councillors, you have all the reports related to the trial, but it's worth emphasising that traffic on Cavendish Road has reduced by the 25% as mentioned earlier during school terms and by 41% daily in school holidays. Here we go. This is what it looks like. Has the trial created a better community space? Yes, it has. Winifred's Lane has been transformed into a vibrant, active travel area with an uplift in active travel of a whopping 185%. It has become a safe area for everyone, including children and families. Winifred's Lane is now used by the local school for cross-country running. Cross-country running, not rat running. Has the trial succeeded in making the area safer? Yes, it has. Prior to the trial, cars parked on Cavendish roads were frequently damaged by heavy volumes of passing traffic. Some cars were completely written off. Several more serious accidents occurred. Since the trial and the substantial drop in traffic, there have been no accounts of accidents at all on Cavendish Road. I humbly ask the panel to reject this call-in and keep evolving Bath into a safer, healthier walking and cycling city. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so we move on to Bethany Klaus-Whittock, please. Yeah.
There we go, sorry. Here today to urge you to rely on the extensive studies and wide consultations performed by the Council to reject the call-in and make the ETRO permanent. I'm a Bath resident living in Lower Lansdowne before and during the ETRO at issue today, and my family and I walk to and from school, work, the gym, the shops. Safety measurably improved with the LTN in place, where my daughter was able to walk to and from school without near misses from drivers rushing on the school run. And we could walk our dog over to the golf course without concerns for our safety. Our experiences are in line with the many benefits outlined in the Council's report. We welcome and appreciate the trial, and it has made a clear and positive impact on the quality of life and safety in the neighborhood. And with some tweaks, it could be made even better. Along with being a local mom and a former state primary school governor, I'm also a trained attorney with a master's degree in public policy with extensive work history in multiple levels of government, city, county, federal, and the UN. As such, I have a great deal of experience with policy making, analysis, and the processes of good governance. I have followed this LTN since its inception with great interest, and from everything I have seen and read, it was done in good faith, in accordance with due process, and with full transparency. Candidly, I find it profoundly undemocratic that a small but wealthy group with a clear agenda can fund a separate assessment that is both opaque and vague and contains what appears to be a flawed methodology in an attempt to subvert an initiative that has proven empirically successful by the stated measures for an active travel network. Likewise, it is unsurprising that the third-party report paid for by this group reached the conclusions that it did. You have heard and will hear a number of statistics being offered that bear little basis in reality, but the data is clear. Traffic has dispersed over a wider area. The volume of vehicles using the junctions of Cavendish and Winifred's Lane has reduced. Monitoring has not demonstrated a detrimental impact on air quality overall when compared with the baseline, and there has been an uplift in active travel in Winifred's Lane. It is obvious from the commentary that the persistent school-run traffic on Sion Hill near Kingswood Prep is the source of both the objections and the problem. It seems that the appropriate resolution is not, in fact, the undoing of a successful active travel network, but rather improved logistical solutions that can and should be managed primarily by Kingswood with the support of the Council, as well as heightened enforcement action against poor driver behavior, which would serve the dual purpose of enhancing public safety and additional revenue collection. I respectfully request that this panel rejects the call-in and seeks to address the stated issues by other means. Thank you.
Thank you. Another one, impressively on time. Okay, so we've got William O'Connell speaking on behalf of Olivia Webb. Please.
It's already on.
Change of specs.
I am here to speak on behalf of Olivia Harmer-Webb. I represent the Sion Hill Place Residents Association, all of whom opposed making the Winifred's Lane closure permanent. The closure has diverted substantial traffic through what was previously a genuinely livable residential area, where families walked and cycled safely with children. Traffic conditions may have improved for Lansdowne Crescent, but the problem has simply been pushed into our neighbourhood. It has been displaced. We now feel in danger crossing to our own communal lawn and walking on our pavements, particularly around the Sion Hill Place Spinney. I was nearly hit by a car myself. We have witnessed accidents not reflected in the Council's data, along with multiple near misses. Blind bends and narrow residential roads are now carrying levels of two-way traffic they were never designed for. Cars are forced to mount pavements. This is a serious safety risk. Noise and air pollution have also increased, directly affecting our residents, some of whom have respiratory vulnerabilities. Winifred's Lane is too steep for our residents, particularly children, older people and a neighbour whose child is in a wheelchair, to walk or cycle down safely. Meanwhile, traffic has increased northbound on Sion Road and Sion Hill, which are our practical, active travel routes. Our loss of safe, accessible walking and cycling is not acknowledged in the report. Sion Hill Place is a Grade 1 listed Georgian terrace. Under Section 66 of the Planning Act 1990, the Council has a statutory duty to preserve its setting. Increased traffic brings vibration, noise and pollution that affect its character and long-term condition. This duty has not been fulfilled. Councillors Elliott and Hodge previously stated in writing to our Residents Association that if traffic was diverted into our area, the trial would be considered a failure. More traffic has been diverted northbound, yet their promise to our residents has not been honoured. Our Residents' Association has repeatedly requested meetings and sent emails to our councillors without response in recent months, while engagement has continued elsewhere. That does not reflect equal treatment of affected residents. As the Residents' Association most negatively affected by the closure of Winifred's Lane, it is deeply concerning that we have received no meaningful engagement from this council when they claim to represent our views. Councillor Manda Rigby has said that residents who live in an area 24/7 should carry greater weight, yet our Residents' Association has been ignored. Please uphold democratic principles, listen to us, decouple Winifred's Lane from the Etro and reopen it. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, we move on to Robert Parker, when you're ready. When you're ready.
I'm speaking on behalf of 80 households of Zion Hill and Summerhill Road Residents Association. We strongly object to the closure of Winifred's Lane. The RA represents a broad range of residents, including young families, walkers, cyclists and bus users. I attended an early public presentation about the traffic options, and the RA committee members attended subsequent meetings. Neither the closure of Winifred's Lane nor the unfounded linkage to the Gay Street ETRO was ever presented to public comment. The final scope of the ETRO was a complete surprise. The RA then conducted a door-to-door survey. We did not encounter anyone who approved of the closure of Winifred's Lane. In fact, many were very vocal in their opposition. Our own figures corroborate the council statistic. 72% of the affected area are opposed to the closure of Winifred's Lane. Regarding safety, the blind bends and narrow pavement on the loop below Signal Place are clearly unsuitable for the increased two-way traffic, which was previously almost wholly one-way. An increase in the number of accidents in this area is inevitable and orally evidenced but omitted from the report. The curb in this area is almost completely worn away, and the pavement is so crumbling it is now at the same level as the road. Drivers will be unable to distinguish the road boundary. This is a clear hazard for pedestrians. At the top of Cavendish Road, cars now pass at speed round the corner into and out of Zion Hill West. Prior to the ETRO, this was a give-way junction requiring traffic to be more cautious. Now pedestrians such as myself need to be extremely vigilant when trying to cross at the top of Cavendish, and it must be perilous for cyclists attempting to enter Winifred's Lane from Cavendish. The single-member decision states that it has been made irrespective of any mitigation. Not only does this show a blatant disregard for safety, the suggested mitigations will not fix these new dangers created at the top of Cavendish and in Zion Hill Place. At peak times, the affected section of Zion Road near the gates of Kingswood Prep School is now a bedlam of vehicles attempting valid journeys north or south. My household and 3 neighbours share the exit of the school, and as a result of the havoc, we are restricted in the times we can make journeys or arranging deliveries and trades. I urge the Scrutiny Committee to suspend their decision until they have observed this created chaos for themselves. In summary, safety for all road users and pedestrians in this area has been compromised. The closure of Winifred's Lane has manifestly failed all 3 objectives of the LTN. No reasonable council would route traffic from an unclassified road just to be displaced onto another, less suitable unclassified road, past a school and more residential properties. There is no rational reason that justifies the closure of Winifred's Lane, and it should be unlinked from the other ETROs and reopened.
Thank you. We move on to Tim Spratt.
I ask the committee to support the call-in. I live in Upper Lansdowne Mews, which is within the LN and is affected by the closure of the lane. I'm also a member of the Lansdowne Crescent Residents Association, which I should stress is formally neutral on the closure of the lane. I'd like to begin, please, with a quote from one of our ward councillors, Mark Elliott, speaking about Winifred's Lane, and he said in January 24, quote, "If, following the trial, it is indeed the case that traffic is simply diverted onto unsuitable routes, then it will not be made permanent, and adjustment or removal will be the only viable options for consideration." And Lucy Hodge, our other ward councillor, said the same, that traffic simply choosing to use Zarn Hill West and Zarn Hill Place to join back onto Zarn Road, quotes, would clearly not be an acceptable outcome. Please let's be clear. Traffic on Zarn Road has doubled. That traffic, and that's including outside of school hours. And on Morford Street, traffic went up by 400 vehicles per day, also affecting another junior school. Now, these are precisely the outcomes that both our ward councillors said would be unacceptable. Please, I ask you to scrutinise promises that were made to us in the ward, should they be broken. More than 500,000 additional vehicles have now been sent past 2 junior schools per year through the closure of the lane. Making closure permanent is a deliberate choice to send much more traffic past schools. Please will you scrutinise what is safe for school children and their health. And what is omitted from decision reports? Collisions. A 4-ton lorry wrote off a resident's car on the blind bends of Zion Road. That was reported, yet didn't appear anywhere in the reports. And speed data, the number 2 issue shown in the survey, not in the reports. And Active Travel's LTN 120 compliance review of Winifred's Lane found 4 critical safety features and stated that the design would, quotes, likely reduce safety, not in the reports. Even the Lansdowne Crescent Residents Association has said, quotes, Winifred's Lane has a gradient of 16% at its lower end and is certainly not safe for children to use as a cycle route. No one's saying do nothing, but ultimately this comes down to the simplest of choices. Simply swap the bollards of Winifred's Lane for speed bumps. Or if you choose to support its closure, then choose danger, community division, risking Lucy and Mark likely losing the ward in 27, and ignore the vast majority of residents who are clearly worried about safety.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, we now move on to Neil Billett, please.
I am in Lansdowne Place East within the livable neighbourhood zone and am directly affected by Beatrice. While I am neutral on the Gay Street and Catherine Place measures, I oppose the Winifred Lane component. Process. The Council initially stated that detailed design consultation would take place before the trial. They later admitted this did not happen and subsequently claimed that the trial itself constituted the consultation. However, Council documents produced before the trial's conclusion present Winifred Lane closure as a predetermined feature of the movement strategy. This contradicts the premise of an open consultation process. Policy. The Winifred Lane trial does not align with Council policies. It has increased traffic past schools, displaced vehicles onto residential streets during non-school hours, raised emissions and reduced pedestrian safety and well-being. Facts. Traffic data clearly highlights these policy failures, and accidents not referred to in the report are occurring. They're occurring now. Cycling on Winifred's Lane is not a reasonable contribution to active travel. Government guidance excludes it as a safe cycle route due to its gradient. It is also illegal to cycle down parts of Winifred Lane, so how can it be a cycle route? With 72% of the residents opposed, community sentiment strongly indicates the one-way closure has not worked. Those residents are within the area. Unlike other LTNs, there are no viable alternative primary routes for displaced traffic. My experience, this intervention only really affects pedestrians, not cyclists. It's too steep. It's too dangerous for cyclists. I regularly walk in the neighbourhood with my family and our dog, and while Winifred's Lane may feel marginally easier to walk, this comes at a huge cost of shifting more vehicles into densely populated residential streets. Most of Winifred's Lane already has pedestrian pavement for over 2/3 of its length. Closing an entire road to address a missing 50 metres of pavement is disproportionate. There are other solutions proposed to manage safe cycling and walking and speeding, all of which have been omitted from the Council's report. Why? Why is the speeding omitted from the report? Conclusion. The Winifred's Lane trial has failed in terms of process, policy, evidence and neighbourhood opinion. As a scrutiny committee, you can choose to overlook these issues or request that the decision be reconsidered. Winifred's Lane should be separated from Gay Street and Catherine Place measures and reopened. The neighbourhood has spoken clearly. This is an opportunity to listen to the people in the neighbourhood who are proactively wanting to make things better. And please act responsibly and separate the Winifred's Lane.
Thank you. So I think it's Malcolm Baldwin, is that right? Okay, that's what I thought. So, yeah, I thought I was right, wasn't I? I said it was Neil Bennett. Oh, I don't know. So you are Neil Dickinson, sir, are you? I'm very pleased to hear it. And you, sir, are Neil Bennett. Excellent. Right, when you're ready.
Good morning, everybody. I'm speaking today as a resident of Somerset Lane. I'm living very close to Winifred's Lane. I'm a bit stunned by some of the comments already on Winifred's Lane, but I'll carry on. I live in the heart of the trial area that's causing the problems. I am not a transport consultant or an expert. Neither do I live in, as some people do, in no-through roads. But the volume and speed of traffic which we had before was totally unbelievable. I think one person said earlier, lethal. The road was lethal. Something had to be done. This was an accident waiting to happen. So I'm very pleased with the trial. Data from the trials, coupled with a thorough and extensive consultation process, have clearly shown that the ETRO has met the objectives of a livable neighbourhood and is supported by those living closest to the affected roads. So I ask the panel to reject the call-in and make the ETRO permanent. The trial confirms thousands of vehicles a day were using Cavendish Road and over 1,300 using Winifred's Lane. Let's be clear what Winifred's Lane really is, Winifred's Lane is. It's a single-track narrow lane with no footpath on most of the area where vehicle speed is unhindered. As stated in the Council's report, Winifred's Lane is inappropriate for traffic. So I joined the local residents association, and at an AGM in 2020, around 100 members voted for the area to be considered for the Council's Livable Neighbourhood programme. People were fed up with the speeding traffic in the area and being used as a shortcut. Subsequent AGMs and association communications have been very clear and have continued to inform members of Council's consultation process. I therefore, in 2022, unlike some people, attended the area co-design workshop organised as part of the consultation process. A very good evening. And every group that evening agreed that the major problem in the whole area was traffic coming from Gay Street, the Circus area, Marlborough buildings, using Cavendish Road, Winifred's Lane as a rat run for through traffic. So the idea of decoupling it doesn't work. It does not work. It's got to be one scheme. Much of the negative feedback regarding the trial has been exaggerated, and the Council's own report states that this data cannot be verified and uses methods that are inappropriate and which overstate the harm of the scheme. I walk that area many days a week, and I have not seen an 800% increase in Zion Hill. Yes, there's been an increase which you can deal with. Results of the trial have been very positive for local residents, with significantly less traffic, as we've said, the ability to walk Winifred's Lane safely. People do cycle, people do run it, and poor people are actively in active travel. In summary, and again I'm quoting from Councillor sources, the 3 trials have been successful in meeting the objectives of a livable neighbourhood. The benefits outweigh the manageable downsides. Manageable downsides.
Can you bring your conclusions, please? You've run out of time.
Yeah, okay. I'd just like to say I don't want to return to the 1,300 cars a day in Winifred. It's totally unsafe, and I therefore would like to reject the call-in and make the extra permanent. Thank you.
Thank you. So we now go to, I think, Malcolm Baldwin. I hope, anyway, because he's stood up and sat in a couple of times, hasn't he? Start when you're ready.
Thank you. Good morning. Politics can too often be littered with broken promises. A quotation: "We will continue to work with residents on designing and delivering meaningful improvements, such as to rat running and speeding, through our Livable Neighbourhood programme." Baines Livable Democratic Election Manifesto, May 2023. So voters responded with an overwhelming majority for a political ethos in which the concept of the introduction of LNs into our city was entirely implicit and proved to be part of a thorough and ongoing consultation process, well endorsable within the context of the Gunning Principles. 2 definitions. A referendum is a general vote by the electorate on a single question that has been referred to them for a direct decision. A consultation is a general vote by the electorate on a single question. A consultation is defined and should be understood as being the act of exchanging information and opinions about a subject in order to reach a better understanding of it, to assist in making a decision on it. Anyone, including independent councillors and others, who initiated this call-in and who may have thought this whole process was a referendum, perhaps have not been paying attention. I do not believe that there are any robust, quantifiable issues to substantiate rejection of the Lower Lansdowne and Circus area traffic management interventions. Taken together, they reflect a key element of Baines's LN policy to keep unnecessary through traffic off more minor residential streets and also enhance dramatically our local environments in so many other ways. In particular, the Gay Street and Catherine Place interventions provide the unique opportunity to link an important heritage and tourist area of our city with the originally implemented livable neighbourhood of the Royal Crescent, together with the parkland areas which surround both its and our own catchment areas. Thus, we create a benign, much safer and significant green swathe, combining and enhancing some of our city's most important heritage features, represented by a seldom recognised, very mixed residential demographic. Members of the panel, as I have said, politics can all too often be littered with broken promises, but today this need not be the case. Manifesto commitments should not be mere fictional devices. Let's support the immense effort and work undertaken by officers and also those 2 cabinet members who have currently made this LN decision one of permanency. I urge you to completely reject this calling and fully support the permanency of the Lower Lansdowne and Circus area livable neighbourhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, there's 3 left. Will Honey.
Good morning, everyone. I am a resident of Somerset Place, and I've been living there for 5 years, and that's within the trial area. Clearly, this is quite a polarising topic, so I wanted to start with something that maybe unites us all, which is traffic in these residential areas in the trial scheme is not good. It's for all the reasons listed above. And I think we could all agree that the aim of the scheme is to try and improve that. And I don't think that's controversial to say we're all on board with that. So the question really is, does it help? So anecdotally, from my perspective, yes, it does. It's quieter where I live, and Winfrid's Lane, that we've talked about quite extensively, is so much quieter. And there actually used to be a running joke in my family as to whether you could get down Winford's Lane without meeting a car, and you never could. And then you had this awkward shuffle, or you had this awkward interaction with the car where you almost got run over but didn't quite. But this isn't about, does Will like the changes to the scheme? This isn't about the individual. This is about the community. Does this benefit the community? And really, we have to use the data generated as part of this scheme to understand what the impact on the community was and is. And it sounds overwhelmingly like it has had a positive impact on the community. And that's not to say that there aren't trade-offs in this. It's not that, for me personally, it takes me 1 or 2 minutes longer to get to where I live, so I've got to take a roundabout route, and there are lots of trade-offs like that as part of the scheme. But is it worth it? For me personally, yes, it is. And again, to understand if it is worth it for the community in general, we need to look at the data. And I think there was a phrase that was said earlier saying, perfect is the enemy of good, and it feels like we could be in danger of falling into that here. Because ultimately, this scheme is a wider piece of the puzzle to make Bath what we all want it to be, to deal with some of the traffic problems within Bath. And data will tell us if this has worked, and we need to build on, if we always try and go for something that is totally perfect, we'll never really make any progress. So we should follow the data which shows that this scheme has worked. So I kindly ask you to reject the calling.
Thank you. Anne Pearson.
Good morning. As a resident in the area covered by the Lower Lansdowne and Circus Livable Neighbourhood Trial, I wholeheartedly support the forward-thinking decision to make the 3 linked through traffic restrictions permanent. I always walk around the area, and for 5 years or so prior to the ETRO, I observed a noticeable increase in traffic volumes and resultant problems such as reckless driving and speeding well over the 20-mile-per-hour limit. In one instance, a car was driving southbound on Winifred's Lane, and the driver attempted to push my husband off the lane. The ETRO scheme evolved from workshops and exhibitions which I attended, where there was overwhelming support for changes to the status quo in the area. In particular, attendees noted the volume and speed of northbound traffic from the bottom of Marlborough to the top of Winifred's Lane. Disappointingly, the absence of objectors at these sessions was noticeable. This meant that they self-excluded from the problem identification and potential solution processes. Since the introduction of the ETRO, I have found the area to be much safer. There is now a far more pleasant environment in which to walk and chat with friends and neighbours. When crossing Cavendish to the High Common, I no longer fear being hit by racing cars. I have observed far more people walking up and down Cavendish and Winifred's Lane, including individuals, dog walkers, school children, as well as walking groups on their way to and from the trails on the Upper Lansdowne fields. In my view, it is imperative that the 3 schemes are viewed as a whole, not as discrete entities. Separating them will only serve to create a new round of traffic displacement issues, most likely increasing traffic volumes and associated problems above pre-ETRO levels. There will always be downsides to any livable neighbourhood scheme, but in this instance, there are proposed mitigations to address legitimate concerns. Many people don't really like change. They don't want to think about doing things differently. However, maintaining the pre-ETRO status quo is untenable and dangerous. I trust the Council will take courage in its convictions and support the decision to make the trial scheme permanent. I therefore respectfully ask the panel to reject the call-in. Thank you.
Thank you. So before we move on to the last speaker, who's Richard Brown, I think it would be a good idea to take a short recess, gap, relaxation time, comfort break, whatever you want to call it, because it's quite crowded and some people might quite like to leave anyway at that point. So I will have a 10-minute gap after this speech from Richard Brown.
Okay. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. By way of background, I am a resident of the Circus and have lived there for just over 11 years. I am a member of the local Residents Association and previously served as Vice Chair on its committee. My comments in my personal capacity are targeted at the impact of the scheme from the through traffic restrictions into Gay Street and on Catherine Place. In recent years, I have witnessed a beneficial impact on the local community in the Circus area from a number of council traffic schemes. Two in particular, the prohibition of tourist coaches and the increase in resident-only parking spaces have served to reduce traffic volume, traffic noise and pollution in this residential area. I see the traffic scheme under discussion today as a further essential step in improving the lives of residents in and around Lower Lansdowne. The trial scheme has had several clear successes in improving the lives of residents. I have observed four main outcomes. One, the eradication of rat-run vehicular traffic moving north on Upper Gay Street. Two, a material reduction in rat-run vehicular traffic moving south on Upper Gay Street. Three, a significant reduction in traffic congestion at the George Street, Gay Street intersection with better traffic flow along George Street. And finally, a significant reduction in rat-run traffic through Catherine Place to Bennett Street. The net result from the lower traffic volumes, as evidenced by council data, creates a safer environment that has supported increased walking, cycling and e-scooter activity in and around the Circus. In particular, we have seen parents confident enough to teach their children how to cycle, and also one gentleman that teaches people how to ride a penny farthing. From the scheme benefits that I have observed, I support the decision to make permanent the through traffic restrictions and to create a truly livable neighbourhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, it's 11:05. We will start again at 11:15. Thank you.
about public health. Areas fundamental duty of care to all its residents. All the councillors present here today voted for Vision Zero in November 2023. This LN does not support those aims and should be judged on what we have democratically voted to implement. The extra miles driven by the displaced traffic flies in the face of the outcomes we are meant to be achieving. Gaps and flaws in the data. The recommendation to make the trial permanent rests on unsound data. Critical metrics, including vehicle speeds, kilometres driven, carbon emissions and implementation costs, were omitted from the reports. Active travel figures for cycling around Winifred's Lane were miscalculated, and pedestrian activity in areas like Catherine Place actually decreased during the trial. This scheme does not comply with Department of Transport's LTM 120, which BAMES have stated in our own policies to be a mandatory technical standard. There has been a review by Active Travel England, so why are we ignoring it and pretending it doesn't exist? The Council's dismissal of an independent traffic monitoring report commissioned by residents claiming it cannot be validated appears to be an attempt to protect a predetermined narrative. Procedural unfairness and the muzzling of residents. Finally, we must address the erosion of democratic process. Residents were initially told they could not speak at Cabinet because the decision was regulatory and would prejudice the outcome under Rule 3.2.20 of the Constitution. Internal emails suggest that public statement slots were retracted because the decision had effectively been predetermined before the Cabinet meeting even occurred. This muzzling of the public on a matter of intense community impact is a failure of transparency and governance. In conclusion, the Winifred's trial has failed when measured against the Council's own objectives. It has made our school routes more dangerous, our air more polluted in high-density areas, and ignored the overwhelming opposition of the local community. The linking of the trials is arbitrary and has no stated legal basis. The Council states the linking is to prevent vehicles shortcutting to the A46 and the M4. Catherine Place cannot help you if that is where you want to go. It's not on the same journey. The principles underpinning linked cells is that by removing one would inundate another. That inundation has happened on Sion Road regardless. Improving the link does not function. With it being arbitrary, the use of area-wide data is also arbitrary. What happens on Catherine Place has nothing to do with Winifred's Lane. In isolation, the Winifred's Lane trial has unequivocally failed. The decision to treat the three ETROs as a single linked scheme has no stated legal basis in the reports, and I urge you to send this decision back to the Cabinet members for review and encourage them to separate and revert the Winifred Lanes ETRO. Do not prioritise the hope of a theoretical transport model over the lived reality and safety of the residents who know their area best.
Thank you, Colin. I gave you about 26 seconds. You were more than welcome. Okay. For Colin, from the panel, yes, Joe?
Councillor Blackburn. I have two questions for you. One, you talked about the process, and you have raised that you feel that some of this has been predetermined and there has been a failure of transparency and governance taking place. Could you explain a little bit more about why you think that's important in this case?
I think what's really important about this is where this all started, from a community workshop to try and understand the needs and create some improvements. Nobody's disputing livable neighbourhoods are a great objective. Unfortunately, the Winifred Lane part of it was never part of that process. So to then bring it in at the last minute without genuine consultation is the start of the flaw. So from that point of view, then to take data, having linked three things together, which do not have a categorical link, two areas are absolutely working fantastically. I'm certainly not here to in any way raise concerns about those, but I'm trying to identify and understand that the genuine lack of consultation around this particular area is the problem.
For that. And so I guess I'm trying to understand is that you're saying that the two livable neighbourhoods that exist further south of the city make sense, but this third one, which lots of people have predominantly spoken about out of the 17 speakers, is the problematic one, and there needs to be a way forward. But looking at where people are arguing where traffic has moved to, you mentioned, I'm just going to get the names right, George Street, Moorfield Street and Julian Road. Do you have any information about the socio-economic group and why they aren't represented here today speaking about how they've been impacted? Because I feel like we've got one group of people who are making judgment are a certain socio-economic group, and I don't feel that there has been a lot of representation of all types of different groups. So could you maybe say something about that?
Yes, Councillor Wright, thank you for that. I think the reality of the speakers we've heard today and the nature of their lived experience is distinctly different. Now, the nature of that closure, and I get we're trying to move traffic onto main roads, but some of those main roads, I mean, Julian Road, you look at it, and I don't know, it's not in your wards. I appreciate some of you are probably not familiar with it, but there are social housing flats, there is a density, we've got a school, you know, there are higher buildings compared to some of the very nice crescents that are just to their west, which is where we've had representation from. And unfortunately, I don't have the answer as to why those people don't feel able to come and talk in front of the council.
Sorry, finally, one more question on school streets. So from what I can gather, you have a particular school. It is a private school. It is the one that seems to be creating an awful lot of traffic at key times. Do you know what representation has taken place from that school and how that information has been fed back into the report that you feel that residents are responding to?
I can't find any.
Right, so are there any other questions? Yes, Duncan?
Thank you. I think it's very clear what you think about the scheme. I just want to ask you a very, very closed question and a very narrow question. You're claiming that there was predetermination of the decision. You know, whatever the decision has become, you say predetermination. Can you give evidence for that?
I think there's a number of factors in how this has come about, from a consultation or community workshop that never included this particular closure and that didn't allow people a consultation. It was created, and as we've seen, that as far as the trial is concerned, that's what it was meant to be. I remember a long time ago a resident from Summit Hill Road saying to me, it's a trial, it will clearly show it's going to have problems. I went, we'll see. And here we are again on a situation where we're driving through a decision without genuinely looking at the data that reflects it, from trying to have people talk to Cabinet to express their opinions and not being allowed to. That makes it look predetermined to me.
Toby?
Thank you. I would just pick up the point that you made in response to Councillor Wright about the being in insufficient contact with Kingswood School. if you look at, for instance, at page 21 of the report, there's reference to the work done with, by Sustrans with the pupils of that school. And later on, there is reference to engagement both with that school and with St Andrews by the project team. Would you like to comment?
Sorry, Councillor Sam, I didn't think there was a question in it, so no.
Eleanor, do you have a question?
I can't see you, so sorry about that. I've got the wrong glasses on. I have read this through very carefully, and I'm quite impressed by
Okay, this isn't a drill, so we'd better do as we're told. Take your time, I can't smell smoke.
Thank you, Chair. After that unfortunate interruption to my question in mid-sentence, I'd like to finish off what I was going to say, which perhaps underlines the importance of the whole thing. I want to know, I found one, this is a very thorough document, but I can't find anything in it bar one line about the finance of the whole scheme. I wondered, as Councillor Blackburn has clearly done a lot of research, if he'd found anything more. I mean, we've got the situation where 5,280 first-class letters were sent out. What did that cost and who paid for it? I wondered if you could give us any more enlightenment about the actual cost to Baines of these schemes, remembering, of course, that WECA money is also taxpayers' money.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. I'm not really sure if that is best directed to me. Like you, I can only identify the documents that are available to us, and this is a decision that's been made by the Cabinet members, seeing that they linked three things to try and create a pocket or packet of money from WECA is part of the issue, I believe, but that isn't transparent and it's not shown why and where that linkage came, other than the fact that it was presented as a package for a tranche of money from WECA.
Okay. I think there was a business plan or something. I wondered if Councillor Blackburn could enlighten us about the business plan for WECA.
Unfortunately, I spend enough time analysing what we're trying to do here at Baines as opposed to looking at everything WECA does. They have some clear guidelines as to how this money for CR-STS type of interaction should be spent. Now, that absolutely comes into question in this particular instance because of the safety and the pollutant issues that have been highlighted. But I would imagine our Cabinet members who've made this decision must feel that it's perfectly in line with everything that they've proposed. I can't see that because it's not transparent, because if I look at WECA's information, it would allude to something different.
I have to observe, Chair, that my murky theological mind thinks that they're going to get the costs paid for by the fines of transgressors of these new orders, but there you are, that's just a comment.
Interesting concept. I'm sure it's never been done before. Any other questions? Yes, Malcolm.
Thank you. Councillor Blackburn, just a point of clarification, please. On the Winifred Lane closures there, can I just confirm, are you against the closure of the Winifred Lane and the no right turn, or is it just Winifred Lane itself?
I'm not actually against closure per se, Malcolm, if I'm honest. This is about creating the right solution in a difficult situation. And as you noted and alluded to, that the closure of the right turn has added impact in what could have been part of the solution. Is it speed bumps? Is it, I think I'm not the travel expert. All I know that the lived experience regarding safety and pollutants is affecting residents. We need to reconsider this and look at a better solution.
Okay. I've got a couple of questions. Well, yeah, they're sort of questions. I'm not a Bath person, so I had to spend quite a lot of time investigating these three particular changes, which was a very worthwhile exercise, because I think looking at the map, it's not at all clear the situation that you find at some of these junctions. What I found quite surprising was just how small and narrow St Winifred's Lane is. And you're suggesting, and I'm not saying what you're suggesting is wrong, but from somebody that's only ever seen St Winifred's Lane as it is now, there were significant numbers of cars going up Winifred Lane. That's my question. There were there? How many? Do you have any idea how many before the thing?
Yeah, approximately 1,300 vehicles per day were going up Winifred's Lane.
And it seems to me that that road was never designed for that sort of volume of traffic, was it? I mean, it's just it's a lane, isn't it?
With all due respect, Councillor Waite, Bath as a city is not designed for the traffic that we have nowadays. I knew that. So, you know, I think highlighting it as a single entity, and I can take you around many of my ward streets that I'll show you that there are issues with. You know, this is about trying to create best outcomes, and you know, there are two parts of this linked ETROs that are clearly showing some good outcomes, but this one isn't. And I'm not here to say what is that solution in terms of open it, close it, do this. It's about that decision needs to be revisited because the impact it's created is really negative. From a safety point of view and from a pollutants point of view, that is not the stated aim of active travel and what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think we might have to disagree on that, because it just seems to me to be a ludicrous place to put 1,300 cars a day. But we'll leave that one. So the other question I have is to do with your comments about the extra participant pollutions on George Street and in the area of that part of Bath. Now, according to Richard Brown, who was the last speaker of our list of 13, he seemed to have the opposite view. He seemed to think there was less congestion because of the changes. So can you comment on that, please?
Lived experience of less congestion is not the data of further vehicles. You know, congestion and time and pollutants created, that's something distinctly different. And I think we've got to use data to identify where we're putting those pollutants from those vehicles, and we've displaced them into the wrong areas.
So are you suggesting that now that George Street is less congested, it is more polluting? Is that what you're saying?
No, I think you can take any street in isolation and look at one particular area and say, that's benefited, that hasn't, where are we at? I think we need to genuinely look at the impact that the Winifred Lane's closure has had on where that traffic goes. Now, we've heard a lot of it goes around Sion Road. We've heard a lot of it will get passed through and past more densely populated, lower socioeconomic areas and a school on Julian Road. So there will always be a road that wins.
Yeah, because what we want is less traffic, obviously. Tim and then Joe.
Thank you, Colin. We're looking here today, look at procedural issues, I understand, mainly, of how the decision was actually made to get to this particular point. Can you explain what procedural inequities you've actually found? Because you've actually seemed to assert that the Cabinet members have already made their minds up before the end of the programme.
Well, maybe you can explain to me why this Winifred's Lane closure was included in our active travel document or our movement document last year when it was actually still in trial. It smacks of it's been predetermined. So that's what I'm taking it from the data that's presented in front of me, Councillor Ball.
It does not been answered the questions. You've answered the question. You think you have anyway.
Jen?
Thank you. Again, going back to process. So from today, this scrutiny committee is meant to make one of three decisions. It's quite clear that if we make certain decisions, i.e. to send it back, my concern is that about whether things will be changed and measures implemented that will make things better. I certainly know from last year from Sydney Road that there was a question around that, and I don't see any changes to what that looks like. So I just wonder what your view is on what the process would be and what those changes could mean.
A call-in has, as our chair has given us, a clear indication of those three outcomes. Sydney Place, the outcome was not to reconsider it, to accept it in its decision. But during that call-in, as you state, the Cabinet member said that there were mitigations that would come in because they recognised that cyclist safety was impacted. But nothing has happened a year later. So This call-in is about do nothing, just let it rock on and think about the safety and the health situations that we've highlighted. Or ask the Cabinet members to genuinely look at how they could mitigate in some more effective way than possibly has been proposed already to make this better.
Okay, are there any further questions from any panel members? Right, thank you, Colin. So we move on then to the statement from Amanda Rigby and Joel Hurst, who are doing 5 minutes each. Do you want a separate 5-minute clock, or can you cope with 10 minutes going from... Okay, well, we'll go with 10 minutes because that's what Colin had. So, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, colleagues. I'll focus on what the trial has achieved and the policy objective, and Amanda will focus on the decision-making. So the call-in notice that's in front of you contains nothing that was not considered in the decision-making process. The aim of the Liverpool neighbourhood is set out clearly on the council website. The quick version is to improve residential streets, encourage safe, active and more sustainable forms of travel. Typical improvements include through traffic restrictions on residential roads. The programme started in autumn 2020 and we've engaged at every step, so multiple times, as you will see in the papers. In autumn 2020, when we consulted 85% or 1,500 people supported the principle of reducing the dominance of vehicles. For the Lower Lansdowne Circus scheme, the top concern that you've already heard about was through traffic, speeding traffic and school run traffic. So reflecting on that, the transport engineers identified a number of measures which were then taken through the full business case to WECA and is what then became forward as the trials. The aim of the trials were to reduce excessive traffic in residential areas. So to pick up on the first issue in the call-in notice, the failure to meet the stated objectives, Amanda and I are both satisfied that based on the evidence that has been given to you and shared with you, that the Winifred's Lane intervention in tandem with the other interventions has proved to work and met the objectives evidenced in the reports and the decision notice. We've got no reason to believe that the data provided is unsound. We've got the area of the Lansdowne and the Circus has had an overall reduced traffic volume. That's clear in the papers in front of you. And I won't go through all the stats that you've already heard, but a whole bunch of stats have kind of demonstrated that. There's been some displacement, which you've heard about, and in the decision notice, there's discussion about the mitigations to kind of work on that piece. There are other key points to note. I think the call-in notice was misleading around the school safety issues, and I think that the road, particularly Julian Road, is a much more appropriate road for through traffic than some of the others. In terms of the LTM 120 point, this is a total red herring. There is no requirement to meet this cycling infrastructure guidance. It's not regulatory. The intervention on Winifred's Lane is a through traffic restriction, not a designated cycle lane or track. The air pollution, again, is, I think you've been totally misled by the call-in colleagues. You will see from the reports there is no concern whatsoever on the air pollution, and the reports are really quite clear on that and quite strong. So to summarise, there's nothing new in the call-in papers that hasn't already been considered in the decision-making. The three linked schemes are transformational, are reducing through traffic in predominantly residential areas. Safety and regulations were considered very carefully through the normal council processes, the WECA processes, and there are no concerns of substance that have been presented here that haven't been already considered. Air quality impacts of the trial are insignificant, and there are clearly some improvements on the scheme, and that's what we're going to move forward and look at. So overall, the policy objectives are met following the evidence, and the decision to make the trial permanent is the right and logical decision. So I'll hand over to Amanda.
Thank you. I agree with my colleague's comments and think he's demonstrated why we separately both came to the conclusion that the right decision was to make the 3 link schemes permanent. I won't take time reiterating why this is the right decision, but I will give the panel comfort about the way the decision was taken. The process we went through, the huge amount of evidence we gathered, the data we analysed, all leading us to the conclusion. My start point is the relaying of the ETRO that we have currently decided to keep permanent in order to show how we address any perceived issues. On the 2nd of August 2024, we sent a letter to properties directly on or around the proposed trial streets for the scheme, backed by a press release informing them that the planned installation of the trials was suspended. Both the press release and the letter informed residents that the suspension was the outcome of legal proceedings following an application for an injunction brought by a small group of Baines residents, and that a court hearing was listed for Thursday, August the 8th, for a judge to either lift the suspension or continue pending any potential judicial review hearing. The letter and the press release, like everything, point people to the website to keep informed. As part of the court process, the Council requested the opportunity to remake the ETRO and address the technical issues which had been highlighted. These were that an official statement of reasons had not been deposited in the notices. However, it should be noted that the reasons for the trial had been promoted via the correspondence and the dedicated web page. And the second point was that we had not contacted one of the 7 statutory consultees, the Road Haulage Association and Logistics UK, previously known as Freight Transport, for comments. To address these issues, we deposited a new experimental traffic regulation in October 2024. Statement for reasons was included, and all the 7 consultees were asked for their input, and reports again can be found on the website. The Road Haulage Association and Logistics UK provided no comments on the scheme. We then took the opportunity to address some of the issues raised by campaigners on the design of the trial. In so doing, the only issues raised at that time as having any potential legalities to stop the ETRO were addressed. The process then of installing the new ETRO went ahead. It was consistent with all the rules we adhere to, all the other ETROs have been done, and as issues were raised, as an example, about signage being removed or ignored by drivers, we handled them. The process of an ETRO means that, in effect, consultation happens with a live set of data being recorded to see, not theoretically, but how, in reality, when a change was introduced, drivers, pedestrians, cyclists, local residents, and those who wish to use routes as cut-throughs make different choices, and whether those choices lead to the purpose of the 3 linked schemes being achieved. The trial was implemented, and the rest of our data and our monitoring provided is very publicly available. Both Councillor Hurst and myself have read all the input sent in to us directly, to the LN team, the output of the consultation, and the empirical industry standard data that we collected. On all those metrics, this trial scheme has succeeded. In making this decision, we have carefully reviewed the recommended potential mitigations detailed in the SMD report. However, irrespective of whether or not those potential mitigations are introduced, our decision as Cabinet members was that these schemes will be made permanent. We do not accept that the data we've used is unsound. We can evidence that traffic volume overall has reduced and that changes in travel times were minimal on all roads. Reading all the other elements referenced in the call-in, I can't see where it has any validity in terms of the actual decision made and how it was made. Both of those elements are sound. I therefore ask the PDS panel to uphold the decision made and dismiss the call-in. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Rigby. Okay. So we now move on to questions to Amanda and Joel. So I can see Eleanor's hands up. So Eleanor, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I'm basically going to ask the same questions. How much has this cost the Baines taxpayer in terms, for example, in terms of the postage stamps when something like 5,280 letters were sent out first class? So where is the money coming from? It's basically coming from the taxpayer, so perhaps you can help enlighten us how much the whole thing has cost Baines. That's the first question. Second question, how is it that we have got 14 of the livable neighbourhoods, which I presume includes these three, in Bath. And officers have told groups of my residents that they can't have a livable neighbourhood, even though 80% of the residents in Welton Road, Westfield, and St Peter's Road, Westfield, wanted a livable neighbourhood, are in favour of livable neighbourhoods, and I'm supporting them all the way. And finally, the third question, do you not consider that cycles coming at speed down Winifred Lane are dangerous? Because I believe it's not possible to have a speed limit on cycles. Would you look to see if you could get the law changed so that the speed could be reduced, or have some sort of notice to warn people not to come pelting down at 30 miles an hour or something?
Shall I kick off and see how we go? I'll try and focus on the elements of that which are relevant to the decision and the call-in notice, if I can. So on the finances, in the single-member decision document, there's a really clear big section, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, about 10 paragraphs, which sets out very clearly the finances. I can go into the detail of that, but the short version is that WEC have provided the funding for the schemes, which we then, as the package of the Livable Neighbourhood Programme. The details of the exact total quantity of the programme is set out in those paragraphs at 9.4 million across the whole Livable Neighbourhood Programme. And things like the consultation process would have been included in that total cost that's set out in the papers. In terms of the second point about Bath and Nez and the balance of livable neighbourhoods, I don't think that's really relevant to the call-in notice, but I totally accept what you're saying. We've had livable neighbourhoods both in Nez and in Bath, and really excited that you're keen to bring forward more in your neck of the woods. In terms of the final bit about the cycles on Winifred's Lane, the safety issues that were raised about cycles on Winifred's Lane were looked at in detail, and you'll see in the papers that changes were made to the design, the colour of the bollards, the surface, to kind of mitigate any of the concerns around the speed of the cycle. So that was considered, and the appropriate action with the officers' input was taken on board in kind of the implementation.
If I can add just something as a cyclist, there are many lanes in Baines where what you describe is true, and you're also correct that cyclists do not have to obey speed limits, which motorists, I know from my personal experience, find that very difficult to understand. But the solution, to my mind, is a little bit of mitigation. If you put a sort of chicane at the bottom of Winifred's Lane, that would actually stop speeding cyclists because they just go straight into the barrier. So that would be my suggestion, for what it's worth. Anything from anybody else? Joe? And
Thank you. I've got quite a few questions. Robert Parker said they were completely surprised by this ETRO and wanted some explanation around that. And also you had another member of the public who spoke who said that they didn't feel that they were supported by their ward councillors even though they went to them. So I just wondered, as the cabinet members on that, speaking to other cabinet members on that, what was your view of those comments?
Are we taking them all together, or what would you want to do, Chair?
Well, I'll do them one by one because I've got a few and they're quite in depth.
Okay, so in terms of the consultation, I am a little bit surprised that people didn't know that this was happening, because the amount of effort we put into not only talking to residents' associations but directly to individual residents, to schools in the area, to anyone who'd got any kind of view was high. And so, and we did, as I said in my speech, just encourage people to try and sign up to the website, where there was consistently updated information about what was being proposed and how to interact, and how, as one of our other speakers said, there was a difference between a referendum and a consultation, how we were looking forward to getting inputs, which, as Joel said, some of which changed and tweaked some of the things that we were doing. In terms of being supported by people, I think it's fair to say that all of us have been absolutely overwhelmed with, and in a good way, with the volume of people who wish to get engaged in this process. So we have made ourselves as open as possible. We've held special meetings in the evening that we've invited people to. We've gone out, we've walked the area and talked to people while we've been there. We've done absolutely everything we possibly could to make sure that people could have their opinions listened to, whilst acknowledging that, as been apparent today, we can't possibly agree with everybody because there is such divergent range of opinion. That doesn't mean we haven't listened to and read every last piece of information that was given to us before we came up with our decision.
So you talk about things being well measured through the schools. I certainly know I've read something that says the call-in is correct, that the monitoring reports did not include active travel data for Sion Road. Given the scale of displacement onto this road, this is a notable omission. If the scheme's objective was to promote active travel in the area, which it is, the net effect on Sion Road, where conditions for walking and cycling demonstrably deteriorated, should have been measured. So there does not seem to be any measurement around Sion Road, and I'd like some information too about okay, I'll stop with that one.
I'll try and pick that one up. I think of all the schemes that we've done in the Liverpool Neighbourhood Programme, this has got the biggest, strongest evidence base of any, and that we've done more measuring, more assessment of any of the schemes, and on balance, the proportion of evaluation for what are relatively small interventions on the network, it could be argued is disproportionate. But the sections where you look at the active travel, I think, are robust, and I have not seen evidence really to kind of challenge that robustness of the data.
Thank you. Going back to the process, Councillor Jackson has mentioned that she had wanted a livable neighbourhood in her area. It is quite clear in the livable neighbourhood documentation and how the process came about that it was to deliver in areas where there was more deprivation. We know that the area that this section is 68% of households in the Sion Hill, Winifred's Lane area are not deprived in any dimension compared to the average, which is 54% in Baines. So the process to decide this area, why?
Thank you, Councillor Wright. As you know, you were very involved in the setting up originally of the Liverpool Neighbourhood Programme.
Not in the decision-making of what was went forward.
That's what I was going to come on to, if you'd let me finish. So we looked at all the suggestions that came in, and it went through a really, really, really rigorous examination process in conjunction with WECA, who are the major funders of these, to see what we could bring in that would have good impact in a local area, and would also, to Councillor Jackson's point, try and spread them out as far as we can so that these could be seen as exemplars for what could be done, and to make sure that as we were doing the live trials and getting the data through the live trials, we continued to implement in the areas where they would have the most impact. So, looking at what we've got, there is nothing in the Livable Neighbourhoods overall strategy that contradicts any of the things that we've done in this specific one. If your argument is, why aren't we doing more and in different places, I would love to say we would love to be able to do that, and if we get more money we could, but I don't think that has anything at all to do with a specific call-in that was written with the specific points that were made, saying that we needed to look at this specific decision again.
Yeah, I agree. That question really was not appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for that. Okay, then let's go back to the data on this particular call-in, which is that we know now that there is certainly a safety issue outside Kingswood School. We have all unanimously signed up to Vision Zero as councillors, and we want to protect particularly areas outside of school streets. There seems to have been a certain amount of problems in that area now, and I guess the concern from listening to the statements today is there are a group of people who are completely for it, and there are a group of people who are though against it, it's because of how it's being implemented and feel that there's some problems with it and that you haven't yet shaped it in a way that supports lots of people. And that they feel that they are not being listened to and that you're just making a black and white decision today and it's the end of. And there clearly needs to be mitigation measures. I have been here before in a call-in where we asked for that, and that has still not been in place. So
again,
I guess
I don't
that going forward on this one...
mitigation measures are the issue on this call-in. So if you're talking about...
But it is about process, so that we know that there are accidents taking place, that cars are going up onto pavements and are being dangerous outside of the school because of the changes to how vehicles are moving around. And that's a really important issue to people who are walking and cycling their kids to school.
But it is not what this call-in is about. This call-in is about deciding on the process, not the mitigations that follow.
Well, the process has created a problem where you now have more traffic going outside the school than it was previously. So I would like to know some more about what data they have on that and how they've been recording that.
Unless I'm wrong, that is not what this call-in is about.
And if I can, Chair, the single-member decision has picked up on, I wouldn't have phrased them in the way that Councillor Wright has, but has picked up on the challenges. And in the single-member decision, there's a paragraph which starts off, the SMD report recommends that revised parking schemes. There's a paragraph which clearly sets out our thinking in that decision-making process. So the issues that were identified were very clear in the decision-making process and have been referenced in the single-member decision.
Clear, I'm not against what you're saying. I just think we've got to be clear about what the process is. And I'm looking, like you, I would like to see mitigation to help those situations.
It's clear that lots of people want this scheme to be successful and for it to work, but that lots of people are still unhappy about some of the detail. And it feels like we are making a decision today as a committee on making that going forward black or white, and there seems to be grey areas around that, and I am trying to understand the grey areas.
Okay, yeah. Any other questions? Toby?
We've been talking about the school, Kingswood Preparatory School. Can you just confirm that where the difficulty arises about a vehicular exit from the school and not a pedestrian route? That the difficulties on Sion Road relate to the vehicular exit for the school?
Detail. But so it's to do with the exit, you're right, and that's also been set out in the papers, and we've identified that more work is needed to be done with the school to kind of work on that.
Okay, are there any other questions? Eleanor?
Yeah, I regret Councillor Rigby's reply to the question of the Westfield groups, because we've been told there won't be any money for Westfield until the 2027 budget. In other words, a year's delay. Now, far be it from me, of course,
I'll cut across you. This is not part of the...
Hang on, yes, it
no,
is,
I'm not hanging on. I'm the chair. This is not part of this exercise. You're quite entitled to suggest that there should be more call-in neighbourhoods in Westfield, but this is not what the purpose of this meeting is about. The purpose of this meeting is to decide whether the call-in procedure for this one, based in Winifred's Lane and surrounding areas, is sound. That's what this meeting's about.
But
so you should take your concerns outside the meeting, please.
Chair, if this is successful, this call-in, there will be some spare money. That's the long and short of it. So anyway, I'm sorry to have
That's all right.
transgressed.
It may or may not be true, but it's not part of what this process is about.
Oh, we'll be saving ratepayers' money, but the question I really need to ask is this linkage. I'm not really, I thought I'd studied these documents, but obviously I haven't done it thoroughly enough. I'm not quite clear on why we've got 3 for the price of 1, linking, especially bringing in the Winifred's Lane one. I could live with the other 2.
So the work that was done was through a consultation process and co-design, and it was very clear that the interventions were designed to work as a package to reduce that through traffic coming from the south going up to the motorway, and so it was the package of the measures which is what was brought forward from those co-design workshops.
Thank you. I think the gentleman's leaving anyway, but I do not appreciate interruptions from observers, so please observe no more. Malcolm.
Thank you. Will this EOTRO, the intervention here, be successful without the mitigations which are talked about going ahead?
At the risk of people getting irritated again, this is what we're actually looking at today is, did we make the right process and did we make the right decision on what we have in front of us? As part of that decision making, we did look at potential mitigations because, as you can see in the SMD, that was something that we thought we would need to look at. However, to be clear, those mitigations would in and of themselves be subject to the same consultation, the same process as anything else. So what you're trying to decide today is, do you want to send this decision back to us to relook at, or do you want to uphold the calling, or there is the other, as the Chair mentioned, going to Council option. What we can't do is say that the mitigations have to be done in order to be part of it. What we have said very clearly in the SMD is that these are mitigations that we would absolutely look at doing, but they are not part of this calling decision because they're not part of that decision on what we've got in front of us right now.
Thank you for confirming my role, but I asked my question carefully, and my question was, is this scheme successful without those mitigations? And that's entirely based on this scheme.
So looking at the scheme, looking at the data that we've got, looking at the evidence we've got, looking at the targets that we set for the scheme, in and of itself, this team meets all those targets without any mitigations being put in. What we are saying is that we have acknowledged that there may be a need to look at doing some mitigations, but are we saying that without the mitigations the scheme isn't successful? That's not what we're saying at all. It has met all its targets.
Joe?
Picking up on the point that says, did we make the right process? So my question is, do you have a comprehensive road safety audit, including impacts for routes for walking and cycling and collision and near miss data?
Yes, we do.
I would challenge that because from what I can gather, there hasn't been. So that's the challenge of the day, is that some that you think you have, and from what I've been reading, it doesn't seem to be there. In Annex G, driver behaviour analysis partially addresses safety through its assessment of pavement mounting and non-compliance instances, but is not a comprehensive road safety audit.
Was that, what you just read there, Joe, was that part of the information that was given regarding this plan, or was it from your reading, so it's not part of it? Which is part of it. Thank you.
I mean, we believe that we absolutely have got these, and just to be clear, I was quite heartened to see how many people are saying that there's a lot of people who may want to make this work. We just need to keep looking at how we're doing it. That's what happens with every single intervention. So road safety isn't just a point in time where it's done and then forgotten. We will obviously be carrying on looking at that.
Looking at the process of how you got here today, not the future, which you've just told me off about.
Totally accept that, and I'm saying that as far as the process of where we got here, I think I can speak on behalf of Joel for this. Both of us were very content that we had enough information on road safety, because it is the thing that we put at the heart of everything we do, and without that we would not have been proposing that this scheme went permanent.
But there seems to be road safety issues here, and there seems to be issues outside Kingswood School where there are road safety concerns.
All the road safety issues that were identified both at the outset and then during the trial were considered very carefully by the transport team, the officers, the engineers, and it went through all those processes as you would expect, and those you maybe not been given all the documentation for that, but those processes happened as standard council processes.
Malcolm.
Thank you. Apologies if I missed it, but it's a big old pack and I can't see it in the place which I have with the other stuff. But what were the traffic volumes on Lansdowne Crescent beforehand and what they've been reduced back to now? Because I can see measuring in lots of other places, but I can't see there. And that seems one of the key places when we look at traffic being coming up to the top of Winifred's Lane and having split to go one side or the other. Why have we taken that view to go and push it down to the left? And without figures to go and see that, it's difficult to go and see the justification of it.
I haven't got the number at the top of my head, but I am absolutely reassured that the traffic flows, the traffic surveys were as comprehensive and probably more comprehensive than would be proportionate for these interventions. There's a huge amount of detail in the papers that you can look at, and I think the numbers will be in there. But as decision makers, we were really satisfied that the officers produced all kinds of various maps with flows and demonstrated that they considered in the information they provided to us all a very comprehensive data set.
No, because you're a member of the public, you cannot raise the points of order. But thank you for trying. I just said you can. Any other questions from the panel members? Eleanor.
Just a quick one. The list of bodies that you spoke to under the community engagement section is most impressive. Just a pity, Curo didn't do a bit more and get more than 2 people coming and so on. But it's a good exercise. But I couldn't see Bath City Forum, which is the only sort of body that represents the wider Bath residents that I can think of. Did you try?
I'm sorry, Ellen, I don't know what you're referring to. Are you referring to FOBRA at all, or no?
No, you've got the Keynsham Chew Valley Forum, the Soma Valley Forum, and there's a Bath equivalent, which I thought was called the Bath City Forum,
sorry, I'm with you now,
which can talk about general issues, but I had thought you might have asked them about livable neighbourhoods.
So you're quite right. Sorry, and I know where we are. It's my mistake. Yes, the area forums have a certain theme, and they go around everywhere with the theme. Currently, the theme is around children. We have in the past gone to the area forums, definitely, to talk about livable neighbourhoods, traffic. I mean, it comes up top of most people's list every time we talk to them about what can we do to get fewer cars making unnecessary journeys. So we don't go with specific things. For those, we tend to go to the more local people, but absolutely we've had the wider conversations for decades around transport with the forum.
Okay, I can't see any more hands up. So we now move to the debate. So would anyone like to start the debate? Sorry? Oh no, we've got to do the bits down the other way. Apologies, yes. Forgot to turn over the page. Okay. So yes, we now have closing statements from the Cabinet members and then closing statements from Colin. Apologies when you're ready.
I think we're meant to have 5 minutes, Chair, but I don't think we'll necessarily need to use all that. I would like to repeat my wish for the panel to reject the call-in and uphold the decision. I believe that we've demonstrated that in terms of looking at all the things that were raised in the call-in notice, there's nothing new in it. Everything that's been raised in the call-in notice was either dealt with originally in our single-member decision, or we've actually explained, I hope to your satisfaction here. If there is nothing new in the call-in notice, and given, as my colleague said, the volume of effort that the officers went into, the amount of monitoring that's done, the amount of data and the amount of evidence, all of which we read through in minute detail before coming to any decision at all, I would like the panel to consider that, that the reasons for upholding the call-in would have to be that you think we did something wrong in the process, and I hope we've demonstrated we haven't, or that it wasn't logical and reasonable for us to make the decision that we did, given all the evidence that we have had, and I think, again, we've demonstrated that's not happened. I'm not going to go through some of the individual things that have been said today that we reject, but I do absolutely want to say we reject any implication that this was predetermined. We want to reject any implication that the data that we based our decision on was flawed, and we want to reject any implication at all that the process was not followed absolutely to the nth degree. I don't know if Joel wants to add anything.
I think that says it all.
Okay, thank you very much. So we now move over to Colin for his closing statements. You have 5 minutes if you wish to take them.
Thank you, Chair. What are we meant to be achieving by LNs? How many of you have actually been and seen the Winifred Lane closure in action? I know the Chair has. Have you seen the gradient on the lane? Have you tried
I'm sorry to interrupt you again. I'm not doing it deliberately, but Eleanor says she can't hear you.
Sorry, Ellen. Have you tried to cycle it? Have you walked around the impacted roads that have taken the brunt of the displaced traffic and seen the geography that we've forced people to navigate? Why do you think using CRSTS funding meant to reduce carbon emissions is appropriate for this section? Clearly, it fails to meet the objectives. This call-in is specifically about uncoupling a linked part of the wider LTM plan that serves to cause more harm when looked at as a single case. Two parts seem to be working fine. You've heard from residents in support of those. I personally spoke to a resident on Saturday who lives in the central area by the circus. He's a surgeon treating NHS patients but works out of our authority area south of Baines, and he grumbled to me that he now has an additional 10 minutes to his commute each day. But I explained that that was an acceptable consequence of the Gay Street Catherine Place interventions. He was having to use main roads, and whilst his journey is unavoidable because there are no alternative transport options for him, this is a better outcome for the city. But that logic does not apply to the Lower Lansdowne trial. It is pushing vehicles onto residential roads, not main roads. Opinions on this aren't split on political lines, but on geographical lines. The near entirety of households who live north and west of the bollards oppose them. The speakers today in support live beneath them, and it was never mentioned as an option in the first phase of the consultation workshops. That should tell you something about why this is so controversial. The Lower Lansdowne residents' safety and voices have been sidelined in favour of a theoretical model that has failed its real-world test. While the Council's stated aim is to support local neighbourhoods and enable active travel, the evidence proves that the Winifred Lane bollards have achieved the exact opposite for the wider community. Councillor Amanda Rigby, in February 2024, on the Southlands ETRO, said, "I'm genuinely saddened that the community has felt split in this way. That absolutely was not the intention." A subsequent opportunity to prevent community split is prevented here today to Councillor Rigby. And please do the right thing and refer this decision back to the Cabinet members to find a solution that is acceptable, and otherwise we're going to live with these unacceptable but avoidable consequences. As ward councillors and speakers have highlighted, there are views both in favour and against. That is precisely why a review is necessary, to provide clarity and evidence-based data rather than relying on who shouts the loudest. We have heard personal experiences, however, it is the committees and ward councillors' responsibility to represent all residents, not just those here today, and quite simply 72% within the immediate trial area oppose the Winifred Lane LTN. In conclusion, we believe the Winifred Lane trial has failed when measured against the Council's own objectives. It has made our school routes more dangerous, our air more polluted in high-density areas, and ignored the overwhelming opposition of the local community. The linking of the trials is arbitrary and has no stated legal basis. The Council states that linking is to prevent vehicles shortcutting to the A46 and M4. Catherine Place cannot help you if that is where you want to go. It's not on the same journey. The principle underpinning linked cells is that by removing one would inundate another. That inundation has happened on Sion Road regardless, proving the link does not function. With it being arbitrary, the use of area-wide data is also arbitrary. What happens on Catherine Place has nothing to do with Winifred's Lane. In isolation, the Winifred's Lane trial has unequivocally failed. The decision to treat the three ETROs as a single linked scheme has no stated legal basis in the reports. I urge you to send this decision back to the Cabinet members for review and encourage them to separate and revert the Winifred Lane ETRO. Do not prioritise hope of a theoretical transport model over the lived reality and safety of the residents who know their area best. Thank you.
Please don't. I'll clear the court if I have to. Okay. So do we have questions? No, we don't. Okay, so no questions to the two panels. We now go to debate, and I think Tim had his hand up. Oh, so Toby.
Chair, I'll begin by responding to Councillor Blackburn's challenge. Yes, I do know this area. I've cycled most of it, except Winifred's Lane, which is too steep for me. But when we first moved to Bath, it was quite a regular route to the A46. So I do know it, and it's not suitable as a route to our main road out of Bath. I think I was changed in my view about the motivation for this intervention by the various speakers who spoke so movingly about the unsuitability of Winifred's Lane, and I think it's as much about, is this a suitable road to be a road at all, as opposed to a byway for cyclists and pedestrians, as by its overall effect on the traffic in the area. But it has a major effect on the traffic in the area, so we need to make sure that the impacts are reasonable. When I first looked at these, my biggest worry was about the people along Julian Road and Morford Street, because that area is going to have to carry not only the traffic displaced by this intervention, but also some of those to the south of that. But the evidence is clear that the impacts on Morford Street and Julian Road are not unacceptable in terms of traffic volumes. The air quality indicators have not significantly deteriorated. The St Andrew's School didn't actually engage in the post-implementation phase, which suggests that the concerns were limited. And I'd note that St Andrew's School, although on Julian Road, turns its back on Julian Road. There are just some portholes that illuminate the classrooms, where the school itself looks onto the other streets in the area, which are not subject to through traffic. So I think that the local effects at the bottom end of this trial area have been acceptable. There remains the issues about the exit from Kingswood School, but I think that the onus is on the school to be more active in helping to manage that. In my own ward, King Edward School has been very active in helping to mitigate local impacts on traffic, and I think it's incumbent on Kingswood School to engage with council officers and cabinet members to help to improve this. So my view is that, as Joel said, this scheme is acceptable without requiring any of the mitigations. The mitigations will assist and should be pursued. But the question for us today is this an acceptable scheme? Has it achieved enough of what it set out to do? And I believe it has clearly achieved what it set out to do. And in order to structure the debate, I think I should move at this point that we dismiss the call-in and that we accept the decision-maker's decision.
Chair, point of order. I don't think it's fair to move straight from the debate into the decision
I don't
process.
think that is a point of order, but I wasn't going to do that anyway. So I think it is only fair that there is a discussion and a debate. We've listened very carefully to 13 residents, 3 councillors, Colin and the 2 from the Cabinet, so it seems to me only reasonable we should do that. But I note that you have made that suggestion, and I'll come back to it for a second at a later time. To speak?
Thank you. I'll indicate our second later on when we get to that point. We have to look at the points today and why we're here. Was this procedurally correct? Listen to Cabinet members, and clearly the process was procedurally correct. We listened to Colin when he was speaking. He's talking about mitigations. Was it? He doesn't believe it was procedurally correct. There has to be a cut-off point somewhere. I've listened very carefully. I've read these 400 pages of issues yesterday afternoon, and it was quite illuminating the work that's gone into this. So I do believe very clearly that the arguments today put by Colin do not challenge the procedure that was taken thoroughly. The Cabinet members have clearly taken into account issues raised in consultations and clearly taken into account what's been said to them and all the feedback they get. So I would actually support dismissing the calling, but I would, however, if somebody wished to believe there are further mitigations to be taken, to refer it back to Cabinet member. I do believe that what we're here today is to decide which of the 3 are relevant. I think dismissing the calling is relevant.
I did say I'd like a discussion and a debate, so I'll happily go to do that. And Duncan had his hand up, and then Joe. And Eleanor. So we'll have Eleanor first.
Thank you,
then
Chair.
Duncan, then Joe.
I, of course, was going to propose something quite different if I managed to attract your attention in time, because I feel that there's been a democratic deficit here. It's not particularly the Cabinet members' fault or anybody's fault, really. It's just the structure of the way decisions are taken in relation to Bath and the difficulty. I think there have actually been considerable efforts to engage the community in various locations, but it's difficult. People have got jobs, maybe several jobs to pay their rent and mortgages. They have family commitments, they have hobbies. They don't spend much time, unless they're the sort of person who fills in their tax returns on Boxing Day. Unless they're that sort of person, they don't go around the BAME's website looking for interesting and relevant consultations. So I would like to propose that we redeem this gap, and remember that always at the back of my mind is the fact that the livable neighbourhoods in Westfield are supported and, I say campaigned is way too strong a word, but very much supported by the parish council. But there's no parish councils in Bath. So I think that this ought to be referred to the full council. In fact, it's unusual. I don't think means that we couldn't possibly do it. And this would give a gap in time, because we've got the budget tomorrow, and then I'm not sure that it would be in time to get into the March council meeting, so it might have to be May, which is unfortunately a delay, but it would give chance for more people to get involved, and I'm sure the press would do their best. So I was going to propose that it gets referred to our council, and when you're ready for it, I will give some very good reasons that you can put them under the heading. 1, democratic deficit, 2, financial implications for, dare I say it, even the council taxpayer in Westfield who's got to stump up for WECA anyway.
Okay, well, we have a proposer and a seconder. we're having a debate. We will take the vote on the proposal and the seconder's motion when the time comes, and if that vote fails, we will come to you, Eleanor. Right, I think that...
Thank you, Chair. Right, let me deal with a few points. Firstly, there have been sort of entwined in some of the comments made, general comments about behaviour of the council or behaviour of individual councillors. But that's something that people can deal with when we get to democratic local elections in May 2027. General remarks about the council, pejorative ones, aren't relevant to this. There have been a number of comments made about other schemes and how they have gone through, and what people have said for and against in those schemes, utterly irrelevant to what we're talking about today. This is not a referendum. I and one or two others are on the planning committee, and I remember a planning inspector saying, you know, one good planning point defeats a petition of 700. It's not a referendum. The consultation is to hear give an opportunity for people to give their views and put forward points that may not have been looked at. And this morning we've heard really good speakers, and we've heard all the arguments, so absolute balance of the arguments. So these numbers and percentages being pushed around, irrelevant. Councillors and the Cabinet, they're representatives, they're not delegates. It's perfectly reasonable that at some point they have to go forward and make a decision based on a process. Now, I'm looking at the reasons that people could use in a judicial review. And the first one is lack of proper process. It doesn't say lack of perfect process, lack of proper process. There clearly has been a proper process. People might not like the outcome, but there's been a proper process. The next point is the decision itself was illegal. Well, this is not an illegal decision. The third point, the decision was perverse, i.e. no one else in possession of the same facts which come to the same conclusion. But we have half the speakers this morning saying they would come to the same conclusion, and I come to the same conclusion. And the last point, there was a breach of human rights, where nobody's human rights have been breached. Now, Councillor Simon talks about his knowledge of the area. I've come to this completely fresh. I live in Salford. I didn't know this area at all before, other than odd visits to Kingswood School for one reason or another. And I've had, like you, not on a bicycle, but had a good look around. And I think the clue is in the name, Winifred Lane. It's a lane. A lane near me has been closer through traffic that's no wider than this lane. It's completely unsuitable for through traffic. That is self-evidently obvious. It's very steep, very narrow, no pavements. It's highly dangerous. In the highway code, the hierarchy of road users, pedestrians are top. So people might not like that, but I'm afraid that's where we are. Financial implications, who paid for this, utterly irrelevant. So I support the motion that's been put forward, and there is a seconder, and that this call-in is refused and rejected. Thank you.
Thank you, Duncan. Anybody else like to speak? Joe?
Thank you. I'm just trying to think of the best way to start this. So it was really interesting to hear how Councillor Toby Simon said that he's often used this. In my history of living in Bath, my father-in-law lived in Gloucester Street 35 years ago, so I think I know this area quite well. one of the first things I ever did on being a councillor was attend St Mary's School to meet with the school children and the teachers because of the concerns they had, even though they sit with their back to St Julian's Road, because of the levels of pollution and the number of vehicles passing by their school. And that was a real concern for them. So I certainly know when this livable neighbourhood was chosen, that for me was a real issue that stood out. And from what I can see from the data, there does not seem to have been a process to make that better. And clearly the reasons to bring in livable neighbourhoods was to support the poorest in our communities from not having rat running through their door. And from what I can see from this is that we have essentially closed what is a unclassified lane, quite rightly, to another unclassified lane in a wealthy area, and coupled that to two other very important livable neighbourhoods that should be delivered. And the combination of these three is why we're now taking this through. And we have clearly heard from people today, those for and those against, that there are very good positives in all of these schemes, but that there are also problems. And by agreeing today that the process is good and fair, then what we are saying is that there are no issues. And quite clearly, Annex G does show that there are some safety issues. There quite clearly seems to be some safety issues around Kingswood School and about how they mitigate the excess traffic that's now going past them and how we do that as a whole. So I am disappointed by this process. I am disappointed by the scrutiny panel because, as far as I can see, a group of people haven't even asked a question of the two cabinet members in front of us when their job is to scrutinise them, whatever their political colour, and that has not taken place today, which I don't think is part of the democratic deficit that Councillor Eleanor Jackson has spoken about. So I can see that already the way that this will go forward and that this will just be signed off and that the issues that are presented to an awful lot of people in this area remain, and that is a problem, and that is still not good enough. And in this time of the request by the electorate for transparency on the decision-making processes that we all make as in leadership roles, is that they feel that they are still left behind. And how do we do this better? And this scrutiny panel, I think, could have been better fit for purpose. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Anybody else wish to speak? Eleanor, then Tim.
Just a couple of things I wanted to say which I think are quite relevant. It might be thought that I don't know the area, but actually the planning committee walked up and down Winifred's Lane twice in pursuit of various applications that we had, one for the university and the other for a domestic residence. But admittedly that was 10 years ago and things have got more aggravated. But I sort of feel that there could be other solutions to the problem in Winifred's Lane, which, you know, I encountered a bicycle. So it does need addressing. And the other point is, I'm not sure that we've really sufficiently considered the tourists. They pass through, but they're absolutely vital to the economy of Bath if we had no tourists. And the fact is that because of the taxis having to make deviations, taxi fares have gone up. I frequently have to take a taxi to the RUH from the railway station because my bus has been late and I'm in danger of being late for my appointment. And then I sit in Julian's Road looking at my watch, sometimes for about 10 minutes, with a taxi trying to get through. And what the point the taxi drivers make is it's increased their fares because of them having to go around. And it's harmful to the tourist trade because they can do fewer pickups in the time of their shift. These, of course, are the station taxis and not the Ubers or from other places. But I do think we ought to consider tourists and how they get from A to B. And
Thank you, Eleanor. Tim?
Yes, thank you. Just replying to Joe a little bit. I'm a Liverpool Labour sceptic. I'm supposed to be careful when I come on this panel today. I don't always agree with the procedure of Liverpool Labour, but that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to scrutinise how decisions actually come to. I found very clearly the decision they came to is actually done properly and actually correctly. I've also been in Winifred's Lane quite a few times, not in the last couple of years, I haven't been there, but I do recall even going back to County Council days, we even questioned why that lane was even open back that far, and were changes made then. If I'm correct, it was a two-way traffic at one time. That's going back a long time now. But it's an issue that we're all pretty much aware of the area. I've been a councillor for 35 years, so I've been there quite a few times.
Malcolm?
Thank you. Yes, so for me from here, it seems clear that we're just focusing on one area really. Gay Street broadly seems to have worked, and I'm happy decision making and things there is fine. Catherine Place as well, there seems to be no consensus objection there at all. There's no issues around that. It's all focused on Winifred's Lane. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind that Winifred's Lane was a that one. Well, we're justifying our knowledge of it. My ward's just the other side of the approach golf course. I've lived in the north side of Bath for the vast majority of my life. I know the area well. And it is a rat run, but there is no real main road which comes out to the northwest of Bath, and that is just true. There were bigger roads. There's undoubtedly bigger roads, Lansdowne Lane and Lansdowne Road, but neither of those are particularly equipped to go and take the volumes of traffic and things that they do. It's clear here that diverting traffic to Zion Hill and Zion Road as well is a concern. I'm also concerned around the feedback we get from consultations here as well. I think 72% within the area that are objecting to it is a significant majority. We need to make sure those voices and things are heard, which leaves us in a difficult position. It's a shame we can't look more into the mitigations, because I am circumspect on whether this goes and makes the flow through Zion Hill and Zion Road accessible and things it is without those mitigations, and whether those mitigations need to be looking at whether they go and still whether Lansdowne Crescent should still be part of the answer. And without exploring those, and I know the ward councillors and things there will absolutely push for all of them, it is difficult to know that they will all come in and will all have the effect that they need to, because they will need the support of others as well. They will need the support of school, they will need the support of parents and things from their school, and as Ed, I'm sure all councillors who've got schools in their ward know what you want parents to do in terms of delivering their children to school by car, and what they actually do are not necessarily the same things. So this leaves it in a difficult position, I think. Yeah, I think that's my comments.
Right, I think I'm ready for a vote, because I don't see any hands up. So those in favour of Toby Simon's motion, which was to reject the call-in, please raise your hands. 6-4. Those against? 1. And those abstaining? 2. Okay, so the motion is carried 6 for, 1 against, and 2 abstaining. I think that brings us to the end of the meeting. Thank you for your attendance. I think we covered the ground pretty comprehensively, and safe journey home.